Hi, welcome everybody. Interview number 3 with Dr. Ron Muller. I've enjoyed very much talking about epistemology and teleology, and now we come to a conversation about nature, and he and I were just talking about, is there anything else that we haven't already talked about that we can talk about now? And I think, there's tons that we haven't tapped into yet. So sit back and enjoy, and be sure to comment and ask questions. And I'm sure Dr. Muller will be looking at these videos, and he can answer them directly. So welcome back.
Thank you.
An unprecedented third interview. I don't think I've done 3 interviews with anybody, but you're out of state, so you're not here too often.
All right.
What's your definition of nature?
Well, nature, the way we usually mean it is to refer to the essence of things, the nature of things, and or the essence of things. So that's why we say the nature of the triangle.
Mm-hmm. Are nature and essence the same thing exactly?
Yes, I think they are. Now, but then saying that though, we have to, I think, draw and distinguish many different categories of nature or categories of essence.
Yeah. See, I always thought that, again, you use the example of a frog.
Yeah.
The essence, like in Platonic or Aristotelian terms, would be frogness, right? Like it's what we all think of in a frog. Wouldn't nature introduce operation, like it jumps and it rivets?
Sure, yeah.
But would that be part of the essence also?
Yeah, that's the essence of the frog, is to croak and to jump around and swim in the water and spawn in certain ways. Those are grounded in the essential nature of the frog's constitution, or we called it instinct earlier. But it's the idea that when we look at animals, we see that they behave according to the principles that aren't clear to us from the outside, but they act according to the principles that are inherent in their innermost core, essential nature, being, core, whatever we say.
Yeah, ties in very much to the last conversation about teleology. I don't want to repeat any of that conversation,
but that's right.
But nature is, as Christians and believers, we would believe that God gives something its nature, right?
Correct.
That it's we were given human nature and not frog nature,
right?
Which means that there's a certain kind of purpose that we have differently than
that's
than,
right.
Than
Yeah,
the frog.
You see, and all living beings are distinguished by their particular type or essence or essential natures.
Yeah.
All living things, animals and plants, roses, frogs, giraffes, whatever. And human beings, we have, as you said, our own distinctive human nature. Now, in our case, though, it involves things like the form of the body and things like this, but it also involves those powers that we described as the rational powers of the soul, the reasoning powers, the thinking, intellectual powers that we have too, and those are inherent in every human being as well.
The first attribute that Thomas describes God with is simplicity in the first part of the Summa. And I often tell my students, I say, God, because they think God's complicated because he's got to, think about so many things at the same time, which of course he doesn't. But he doesn't think necessarily. But wouldn't you agree that the humans are the most complicated of all creatures? We're much more complicated than rocks or crickets or, angels or God, right?
Sure,
So we're complicated.
That was a Renaissance spirit that man is the pinnacle of things in the world. That we're just a little lower than the angels in the summit or the pinnacle of creation in the world, like this. But let me just go on though real quick here, Dave, and point out that sometimes we use the word nature and essence to refer to inanimate things too. Like I said, the nature of the triangle, the nature of the square, or we talk about the essence of justice, or the essence of beauty, or what is the principle of beauty. And in all of these, also with the animals, what we are trying to do, I think, is what Socrates tried to do in the marketplace, in those incessant conversations with passers-by, that he wanted to understand the essence of piety, or the nature of piety, in the dialogue the Euthyphro, for example. What does it mean to be pious, and what is the form or the essence of piety, like this? And here, what we see is that he's always striving to penetrate beyond the contingent factors to identify the necessary features, the core features that have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, back to the triangle, then we understand that you've got to have three angles, and they all have to equal 180 degrees if you're a real triangle.
Mm-hmm.
See, that is a non-negotiable, necessary feature of triangularity,
Mm-hmm.
like this.
Yeah.
But whether the triangle is an isosceles or equilateral, that's something that's contingent. You see, that's not a necessary feature of every triangle to be equilateral, for example, like this. And so, we see in the dialogues, I'm thinking about the Meno is a fun dialogue where he talks about, they discuss the essence or the nature of virtue, you see, like this. And what is the common denominator? What are the core features that are found in every example of virtue? Now, Meno, his compatriot in the discussion, says, "Oh, that's easy to understand virtue. Let's see. There's the man's virtue. There's the woman's virtue. A child, a slave, an old man." And Socrates stops him and says, "Well, wait a minute. This is really interesting. You mentioned all these examples, but I want to know what is the common denominator, the common denominator that's found in every case, or what is that essential feature that's found every time you get a virtue?"
And that's essence.
That's essence, or it's the essential features of the essence itself. And so, Dave, when you and I talk about squares and circles and geometry, then we understand, that it's always got to be there, in every circle, that the points on the circumference are equidistant from the center. There's a feature that has to be there. If it's not there, there's no, you don't have a real circle, or with the square or something like that. Now, on the other hand, when we talk about the animals, we do understand that they have their distinctive natures, but it's real hard for us to pinpoint anything that's absolutely fixed about those natures.
Yeah.
For example, these things, dogs, and we know that they bark, and that's a very common universal feature of dogs, but is it necessary or contingent that a dog barks?
Since there are some dogs that don't bark, that it would have to be contingent.
They're still
right?
dogs.
Yeah.
All right. And what about having a tail, four legs?
And some of them don't.
And so those are all usual things, but can we identify something that is fixed about the dog's nature that we can identify on the radar screen?
Yeah. And again, is this there's always going to be exceptions, right?
Well, if there are, then there's not any fixed nature of dogginess.
Right. So a dog is born with no legs, but people will still say it's a dog because it came out of a mother dog.
And it still has the canine essence.
Yeah.
And it just shows us that having four legs is usual and appropriate, and that's what we expect. But it's not as if those are fixed features of the canine nature. Now, let me just shift gears and now talk to you about my old friend, or our old concern about justice. Because, Socrates was constantly talking about justice, too. And it was that environment in antiquity where the sophists were saying that justice is the advantage of the stronger. I don't know if you remember that, but the sophists were the other guys who were saying that, justice is not this Socratic idea of taking turns and being nice, or the way that Socrates explained it, that justice is to give all things their due. But rather, they said, the sophists said, that justice is just whatever is the advantage of the powerful or the rich, or
kind of Nietzschean.
And Nietzschean,
yeah,
yes,
Nietzsche
absolutely.
would say the same.
And he did.
And Schopenhauer.
Yeah, it's like they say that. Look, if you look at nature, it's not that the animals take turns and whatever. It's the advantage of the stronger, the survival of the fittest, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
which really kind of circles us back to the first conversation on truth, because I think, to get back to your dog example, if a Great Dane walked into this room and a Schnauzer or what are those little hot dog dash hounds, we'd all say dog, but they don't look anything alike, right?
I know.
Or a parakeet and a ostrich, and we say bird.
Sure. You're right. We can understand that they have a nature, but we can't pinpoint it philosophically or intellectually, because the natures are, as it were, closed to our gaze. We can't see into the cat and understand why it does what it does. We know that it does.
Yeah.
But with natures of that type, the forms of living things, they keep their cards close to the vest. You see, they don't disclose themselves to us. Now, on the other hand, the mathematicals and logical principles and those principles of metaphysics that we talked about, those are all very transparent, because the mind can see and understand how it is true that it has to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared in the triangle, the Pythagorean. Yeah, we see that.
Can I, and hopefully it's not too much of a departure, but something you said made me think of nominalism and guys like Occam, William of Occam, where my understanding is there are no real natures, right?
That's what he said.
We just kind of we call that a dog, or we call this a cup. And we just could put a name to it, right? But that's problematic, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Well, or at least he reduces the natures of things to our names that we give them. The only unity in the class is found in the fact that we call them all dogs. See, now that, I think, is erroneous, because they are dogs in themselves. We don't make them dogs by calling them dogs.
Yeah.
You see.
Now, what about the cruel parent who raises their child, and when they walk outside and a bird flies by, and they say, "Oh, look, a refrigerator," and then every time they see a bird, well, what we call a bird, they say, "Look, there's a refrigerator," and then they see a dog, and they say, "Oh, look, there's a car," but wouldn't that child grow up?
Yeah, right, with a confusion in terms of the referent of the concept or the referent of the word. And the poor thing, he goes to his friends and said he was playing around the backyard with his refrigerator.
Well, I mean, but is that Occam's kind of point?
Well, yeah,
we're just giving things names.
Well, yeah, that's the reductionist view, that there are, number one, no natures in the class of animals that are dogs that distinguishes them from cats.
Yeah.
Or giraffes or frogs or anything else, you see. I mean, his point was that the only unity of the universal is found in the language, in the names that we assign to them, you see. But, on the other hand, what Socrates would say is that we understand that in all just acts there is this abiding feature of giving things what they deserve or what is their due.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is a principle that we understand about virtuous or good, just acts, that every one of them is going to be appropriate. It's not going to overshoot or play favorites or, be mean or something like that. It's to give all things their due, like this.
But sometimes that means killing somebody. Sometimes that might mean, even Aquinas said, under necessity you can steal, right? He says that in the Summa.
Does he?
Yeah. If Aquinas, is it sometimes lawful to steal? But he would say, if my family is starving to death,
I know,
and the supermarket will not sell us food,
he
would say,
I can knock them off. Yeah,
I can go over there and steal stuff.
Yeah, and get the lobsters while you're there. Now wait a minute. Is stealing always bad then, Dave, or not? I mean, if Aquinas says that sometimes it's okay, then it's contingent to say that thou shalt not steal. Well, except if you're real hungry, they won't sell it to you.
Yeah. Well, then sometimes stealing would not be. But he also says lying is always sinful.
Yeah.
If you ask me, do I like your shirt, and I
say
don't, and I say, yeah, I think it's a nice shirt. Well, Aquinas would say, I just sinned.
Well, yeah, but I mean, because lying, the church teaches, is always wrong. But stealing, well, then this is the Palmer theory, there's good stealing, and then there's bad stealing. And,
necessary, maybe not bad, maybe not good, but necessary.
I would suggest, Dave, you maybe go back and look at that again, because if I remember, his point was that stealing is always wrong. It's just that taking in that situation you describe of being in need is not stealing.
Right.
I mean, it's not stealing in the sense that you're taking something that's not not yours, because the fruits of the earth should be equally shared by all of us.
Yeah, common property.
Yeah. And as such, if the supermarket people are denying the human family the means for natural nourishment and sustenance, then it's not stealing to take back what you deserve, or what is due to you.
But you can't steal Gucci purses or Lamborghinis because they're not necessities.
Well, but I think that's what you meant earlier about good stealing and bad stealing. I mean, if they were really necessary for Mara to have a Gucci purse. Would you like a purse like that? Do you know what it is?
We were talking about nature.
This is where we see that the moral principles, the Ten Commandments and things, are based upon absolute moral imperatives. And of course, you mentioned Kant before. Kant said the same thing, that there's never a time when it's okay to lie.
Yeah.
Even if your neck's on the line, though, Dave, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were the Muslims that took Christians and then asked them whether they were believers in Islam. And I don't know, what would you do? Would you fudge on the question and say, well, maybe?
Cross your fingers. That's the categorical imperative, right, of Kant?
Yeah. Well, the categorical imperatives, there's never a case in which it's not true that you're obliged to do what is right.
Yeah. Well, the old classic example of like the Anne Frank thing, where the Nazis come to the door and say, "Do you have any Jews up in your attic?"
Yeah.
Well, if you say yes, which is the truth, well, they're dead, and you're probably dead too. If you lie and say no, well, then everybody's saved. But then that's the end justifying the means, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah, and that's the whole issue there. In that case, that's come up innumerable times over the years. The Jews in the basement, They knock on the door and they ask you, "Dave, do you have Jews in your basement?" And you say, "No, not really. I don't like Jews." And in fact, you have 3 Jews in the basement, so you lied, but for a good purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they say, we see the ends do justify the means in that case, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that right? Can we go there?
Well, that would be one argument. I don't think Aquinas would agree, and Augustine wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about nature in relation to supernature, because, and one thing I always point out when I teach my class is that the very, very first article, I think there's 3,000 articles in the Summa.
Yeah.
The very, very first article I hone in on a lot because it's about sacred doctrine, and it's about the purpose of sacred doctrine is guiding man to his final end, and the reason why we need divine supernatural doctrine is because our end is supernatural, but we can't get there on our own, so God has to help us, right?
Well, or it's not achieved in this world.
Yeah,
it's beyond this world,
right?
The supernatural.
But we talked about this book and Will Durant, where he seems to take offense at that Aquinas took something like Aristotelian philosophy. And he supernaturalized it by introducing all this religion, right? Because that's the difference between Aristotle and Aquinas, is that Aquinas took Aristotle and supernaturalized it. Would you agree? I mean,
well, I see what you mean, but I don't think that maybe that's the most apt way to say it. I think I would say that Aquinas just showed that the natural truths identified by Aristotle were consistent with the broader supernatural insights that we have through Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, that's the idea of the great synthesis of Thomas, that he showed how classical philosophy was fundamentally compatible with the truths of Christianity, because we would have had a real issue of faith and reason if they weren't. But Aristotle didn't argue that injustice is better than justice, like Christianity. Christianity argues that we always should be just and right, etc. And his insights about being are all perfectly compatible, I think, with the Christian worldview. So, it's the two are different. In philosophy, we've been talking about how we use our natural reason, common sense, insights to be able to understand certain things just naturally through our own natural gifts. But on the other hand, you see, in religion, then we understand things and we accept them oftentimes in ways that we don't see how it works exactly. Mm-hmm. We can't penetrate into those things. Like we were talking about the Eucharist, you see the form is one thing, but the meaning is different, the reality is different. And how that happens, that's a tall order for any philosopher or anyone. But it's like theology moves on that plane, whereas philosophy is on the natural plane.
Yeah. And if they were a Venn diagram, two circles, would philosophy and theology intersect, or would everything in theology be supernatural and therefore not recognizable by the light of human reason? How much of that Venn diagram would they intersect?
Well, a lot. Because I propose that we understand the evil of abortion naturally.
Yeah.
We understand things naturally, like to honor your mother and father, or to the golden rule of do unto others. Those are things that the Chinese and the Greeks, without any Christianity at all, understood.
But that wouldn't be theology, though.
No, it wouldn't, but the theology comes along and tells us the same thing.
Yeah.
That theology, the Ten Commandments about mother and father, and thou shalt not kill. The abortion thing is just so... it's not just because of our faith that we think it's wrong. We also know it through natural reason.
Right. Natural law, natural reason.
Yeah, and so they have to intersect.
Yeah. But as soon as somebody comes along, like Aquinas did, and said, our intellect basically that is aligned with God, or there's a relationship between our intellect and the intellect, because God is intellect, and it's intellect as well, and all nature and all the same. Then all of a sudden you're no longer a philosopher, you're a theologian, right?
Well, I don't. Well, yeah, yes and no.
Or both.
Well, or both.
Yeah,
I would say that because. The idea here is that in the creation there that you have behind you, God made man and gave him the power of reason and understanding, and made him in God's image. We're made in the image and likeness of God, which I take to mean that we have the capacity for reasoning and understanding that he does. And as such, then, God doesn't make us in such a way that we're locked in order to respect, again, human freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So that he gives us this marvelous gift of being free to do things, to make the world better, and to boomerang back to him our appreciation for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I would see it.
Yeah.
And as such, then... He expects us and wants us to use our own reason to work things out, and that's why governance in the world, politics, things like that. He leaves it up to us.
Yeah.
And we don't have the church running, the National Transportation Agency or something.
Yeah.
You see, that it's our privilege to work towards a just and truly human society,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's a marvelous opportunity to be part of that program. See?
And getting back to the original question about the Venn diagram, maybe one of the problems in our culture today is that Venn diagram are too separated, and really the theology and the philosophy are more overlapped than.
They are.
Will Durant wants us to think they are.
Right. And then on that one, that the Enlightenment thinkers wanted to say that there is no need for the theology diagram.
Yeah.
That we can know everything through philosophy.
And would that be Bacon and Voltaire, or
what was it? Thomas Jefferson said that. He he went through and edited the Bible to take out all the revealed elements.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
What was he left with?
Well, it was a slimmed down kind of philosophical Bible.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Kant. He will work religion within the limits of reason alone, but in which then he argued that we don't really need all the religious stuff. We can understand everything that's important to know just by philosophizing about it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is wrong, you see, because there's so many things that are natural mysteries for us, like we were talking about the animals, and how their instinct works and how it all sets us up. We can chop them up and do tests and run rats and all of that, but we still don't have that access to the inner natures.
We're down to just a few minutes,
Okay.
and I want to kind of wrap this up, perhaps
Okay,
in the
go.
most appropriate way, in talking about Jesus Christ, because as we talk about nature, and we are drawn to a supernatural end. Here you have this one person who possesses both natures, the human and the divine, and that I guess there's I guess if you want to extend the example, that the philosophy and the theology and the human nature, the divine nature, all wrapped up in one person.
Right.
That's a profound mystery.
Yeah.
But clearly the very center of all human experience is really wrapped up in this one person.
Right. Well, and the example of Christ is so overwhelming in that regard. Of course, it is a great mystery, the mystery of the incarnation and that kind of thing. That's why the rationalist thought that it was impossible. But there are mysteries like that we need to not be stubborn about and reject just because we don't understand them. You see? Again, I don't understand why my cat does what it does, but I know that it does it. You see, and so. These are, the challenges of being honest about what we can know and not know in life and in the world. But, of course, philosophy helps us, and literature helps us, and history helps us, science helps us. It's like we just want to be faithful to the quest for wisdom wherever we can find it.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
Well, very good. I've appreciated these conversations very much. Can I ask you a few somewhat related questions?
Oh,
just,
sure.
I don't know if the listeners, viewers, can take this from the conversations we've had, but if you had to choose your three favorite philosophers of all time, who would they be?
I think Plato, mostly because I was just enchanted with him when I first studied philosophy seriously.
Yeah.
But then, Dave, I think I mentioned that I had studied philosophy for the first time when I was in Spain. And the first real introduction I had was reading a work by a Spanish philosopher named Miguel de Unamuno. Miguel de Unamuno.
Never heard of him.
Well, he's pretty well known in Spain, and also, was at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, is part of the kind of the general existentialist movement.
Yeah.
He impressed me about with his ideas about how we should take the whole question of life and living it seriously and living an authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
And that really impressed me at a time when I was trying to figure out how to live an authentic life.
Kind of hit home with you, huh?
And then my third one would be Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard.
Oh, existentialist, right?
Yeah, he was, well, and it was the same thing that it's like not to be blasé or complacent about life, but to take the issues. And so I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, I have to say that at the University of Dallas, I studied and I met Dietrich von Hildebrand.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You met him?
Yeah, he came and gave us a short course in my first semester there. That was
wow.
really wonderful.
Yeah.
And then, of course...
He was a Lutheran, wasn't he?
I think originally.
Okay.
But no, he converted. He was
he did?
definitely
Okay.
Catholic.
Maybe I'm thinking of Bonhoeffer.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
Bonhoeffer was, okay.
And then also I've always really appreciated John Paul II from the point of view of being a philosopher.
Yeah. And Aquinas doesn't make your top 5?
Well, you said 3, Dave.
You gave me 5. If you include John Paul II,
yeah,
and then Dietrich von Hildebrand,
Well, actually, that's interesting because I think St. Thomas is marvelous and wonderful, and then Aristotle would be in there with him on that. But I just resist, kind of having to pick and choose or focus on that because actually I'm my favorite philosopher.
All right, 2 more quick questions and then we'll wrap things up. But any philosopher that you just think that guy's crazy? I mean, I think he was totally off base, and I think his philosophy is a pile of junk. Anybody come to mind, or I know they all have something to offer, but anybody that just I don't know.
There you can make a case that David Hume falls in that category because he seems to be angling intentionally to obscure things, and to throw the monkey wrench into ideas. And there's a way in which you can detect the duplicity in his arguments like that.
But he woke Kant from his dogmatic slumber, though.
Yeah, but that didn't work for either Kant or Hume.
All right, last question, I promise, will be, as you look at today's culture, 21st century, 2021, when we're recording this, which philosopher, for good or for bad, do you think has had the greatest impact on current 2021 culture?
John Paul II.
For good or for bad?
Oh,
really? Oh,
yeah, well, I mean, the direction of called personalism in philosophy. John Paul wrote The Acting Person, that work in Polish. It was translated into English unevenly, this kind of thing. But the sentiment that he expresses that we also find in several other philosophers from the last century. I'm thinking about Marcel and Shaler and people like Meunier, especially. The emphasis upon understanding that persons are the arch principle in reality here, you see.
Yeah.
That society needs to always begin with and understand that we're dealing with persons and not economics or power struggles or things like this.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I didn't see that one coming. I thought you were going to say Marx or Nietzsche, but that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people don't even think of John Paul II as a philosopher. They think of him as a great theologian, but of course,
they do around my house.
Well, I want to thank you for the time and for sitting down with these. I think it was a really fascinating conversations. And thank you for watching. My guest has been Dr. Ron Muller. And again, I want to thank Julie, his daughter, and also her husband, John, for suggesting this at our Christmas party last week. And it was a lot of fun. So thank you very much.
All right, sure, Dave. We'll do it again.
God bless you. Thanks for watching.
Uh-huh.